Hey there, film class, what's going on? Long time no see. Here I am sitting in taking over my wife's office. For those of you that have not seen any of my recordings from my AP and so on. What I want to do is I want to go through just a few of the scenes from the Laramie Project. Hopefully you have watched the movie before you watch this video. So like I said, I'm going to go through a few of the scenes that I think need to be discussed. Definitely make sure that I talk about some of the ones that are for the questions that are a little more, maybe a little more, would be more confusing without discussion. So go ahead and get that going. I'm going to pause this, get the video up. All right, first off, I'm going to say a couple things about the film. And as you notice, the acting itself is actually not very good in this. It's rather unrealistic acting. This was if you read on the worksheet, this was a stage play. And so the actors very much seem like it's a little stilted. Like I said, unrealistic. It's really good actors on here too. Laura Linney and Steve Buscemi, Amy Madigan, some really, really good actors, but even those really good actors come off a little stilted. And again, it has to do with the dialogue. It's a stage play. But anyway, the information, this based off a true story, this idea of tolerance, like I said, this would have come from a unit about tolerance, but the idea of tolerance versus acceptance very much comes into play here. So I'm going to jump to a few scenes. This is going to be odd. I've never done this before, so you're going to have to just, roll with me here. I found this interesting. The sign there, restaurant, put yourself in our place, which is kind of what the movie's expecting you to do. One of the questions deals with, not seeing Matthew. The fact that I don't know if any of you went and looked up, put his name in Google and looked him up and see what he looked like. But the film never does make him an actual character in the movie. We hear about him and we people talking about him. Obviously, the movie's centered around him, but as a character, he never shows up. There is this, which I think is, for myself, is just a heartbreaking moment. Is the moment where the doctor comes out and announces Matthew's death. So I'm going to play that.
At 12 midnight on Monday, October 12, Matthew Shepard's blood pressure began to drop. We immediately notified the family, who were already at the hospital. At 12:53 a.m., Matthew Shepard died. His family was at his bedside. The family did release the following statement. They again asked me to express their sincerest gratitude to the entire world for the overwhelming response to their son. The family was grateful that they did not have to make a decision regarding whether or not to continue life support for their son. Like a good son, he was caring to the end and removed guilt or stress from the family. He came into the world premature and left the world premature. Matthew's mother said, "Go." We've been up for like 72 hours straight and gone home and gone to sleep for half an hour and get up and come. Maybe I was just I don't know. While I was reading that statement, I thought about my own 4 daughters, and she doesn't have her kid anymore.
And that's the importance of that, is the fact that you don't see Matthew is very much that, is, this guy sees his own 4 daughters. For myself, I immediately, anytime I watch this movie, I immediately am texting my sons, telling them I love them, and they always, my sons, "Oh, are you watching that movie again?" So yeah, now they're, they're home with me, so I can go, have to run out and tell them. Just an absolute heartbreaking moment. But that idea is, you don't see Matthew because by not showing him, we picture, other people. We can picture people that we know. We picture our, for myself, my own sons, or you picture brothers, people that again, people in your own world, or yourself even. Um, but Matthew kind of becomes this what you consider an everyman, an American everyman. It could be anybody. It could be happening anywhere. Um, so that's that, that sign at the beginning, says put yourself in our place. And that's kind of what the movie's trying to do, is put you into the place of these people. All right, I'm going to go back to, let's see, this old lady here who comes off, she's not a bad person. But it's just the language, it's so ingrained in the way that they talk.
And even if they did, I'd just say no thank you. And that's the attitude of most of the Laramie population. They might poke one in a bar situation, they've been drinking, they might actually smack one in the mouth, but then they...
But, and it's not even the poke where, she's talking about hitting somebody or might smack somebody in the mouth. It's the word one that she keeps using, one.
They just walk away. Laramie is live and let live.
Which is not true, because here she's talking about violence towards them. They might poke one, they might hit someone, but it's one. She keeps using the word one, and that word is important. And what this film really comes across, especially when we get to the speech with the priest later, is the importance of language and the importance of, of the words that, the words that come out of people's mouth and the way people talk, and what that can, mean to not just for yourself, but what that can mean for other people, especially if you're an older person like this lady, and there's, the younger generations that are listening. I didn't put it on the worksheet, but I put on the questions when this guy, who I
And I asked the professor, I said, I need a killer scene. And he's like, here you go. This is it.
What was it?
That was Angels in America. I read.
So Angels in America, I put on, it's a play that came out 80s. It was about the AIDS epidemic. And that's why when he's talking about his parents not being okay with it and so on, because it really is, again, beautiful play, award-winning play. If you get a chance to see it, you absolutely should. I have a problem with this actor here, because if anybody's seen Saving Private Ryan, which I was just watching yesterday, you understand exactly what this guy did as a coward in that movie, and I really have a hard time with him being in it. He does a great job. He's fine in this movie, but I still have a problem because of Saving Private Ryan. Anyway, I'm going to jump here where they're talking about this guy talking about,
and partially the guys who did it. So, maybe it's 50-50.
They stated that Matt...
that idea that it's, I didn't get all of his statement here.
Actions, but it seems to be partially his fault.
I guess I got most of it. But anyway, him saying, well, it's 50-50. And that idea that because Matthew was gay, that part of it was, his own fault for being beaten and basically beaten to death. That it was, well, that's their fault because they were, violent, but it was his fault because he was gay. And that is, the kind of rhetoric that is going on through this town. But yet this town will continue to tell itself that it's live and let live, and we don't have a problem with gays here. But yet you hear, again, the language, the language and the way people think. They just don't see it in themselves. It's there. The intolerance is there. They're just not seeing it. Or they're unwilling to see it in themselves. This here, and then this kind of goes into that as well. These two here.
Or that I've heard him talk about, he was fine with, as long as, they didn't hit on him. Or as long as, it didn't come up.
When I knew Aaron's just a young kid,
he's there when he's again talking about as long as you didn't hit on him. Unwanted hitting on anybody. The idea that if somebody hits on somebody and they're upset that they were hit on, that allows them to be violent, that allows them to lash out with violence is we wouldn't accept that in any other situation. If it was a guy hitting on a girl or a girl hitting on a guy, and that person was, upset about being hit on and they lashed out with violence, we wouldn't accept that. But yet in this situation, but then, the folks see themselves as tolerant. Even that young girl right there was talking, had seen herself, she kind of saw herself as a tolerant person, but yet they're making excuses for that sort of behavior just simply because this person was gay. 39, let's see, jumping again. This old guy and this old lady here.
Time for us to exploit this.
They made it sound like it was 10 murders instead of 1.
They're accusing the ranchers of being unreasonable and unsympathetic because of how he was
and what his persuasions were. Well, he would certainly be welcome in our home. We'd visit, sit down, have a cup of coffee.
Well, what did you think when you heard that 2 boys from your town did this?
Well, I certainly don't approve of homosexuals, but I don't think anybody has a right to do what those 2 boys did.
Well, where do you think that comes from?
And he knows that's a rhetorical. I mean, it's not necessarily rhetorical but he knows it. He knows. Where do you think that comes from? He's asking them. Again, these 2 old people, they just don't see it in themselves. I mean, he says, I certainly don't approve of this. That sows the seeds of hatred. That's what leads to what ended up happening to Matthew. That's what led to that idea. Is you sow those ideas into people with this rhetoric.
Their hatred towards homosexuals.
I think what most people fear in the gay community is that sexuality is their #1 concern.
Not many people condone it.
When you wear it on your sleeve like a banner.
Well, there's
And the idea that if you're wearing it on your sleeve like a banner, is that if it's something that is still getting, people beaten and, and hate crimes committed against folks, then it should be a concern. For that to think that, that people that are gay have to hide it, have to keep it to themselves. We don't think that way about, other couples. And so again, they just don't see it in themselves. They see themselves, he would be welcome in our home, but yet they, like I said, they just don't see it in themselves. This here, the sheriff, I thought was he made a good point here. This man, the actor Clancy Brown, one of my favorite actors. Love this guy. Oh, and it's going to buffer. Of course, it's going to buffer.
Once we started working into the case, and actually talking to people that were gay and realizing what their underlying fears were, that's when it sort of hit home. This is America. You don't have the right to feel that fear.
And he kind of worded it wrong, but you don't have the right to feel that fear. The idea is what he's trying to say is you shouldn't have to feel that fear. That in America, it doesn't matter what your sexual persuasion is, doesn't matter what your race is, doesn't matter what your religion is, you should not have to walk the streets in fear because of who you are. And that's what he was trying to say. You don't have the right to feel that fear. Is not necessarily, I guess, like I said, it's not the best wording, but that's what he means. And he's right. He's absolutely right. And that's the idea, is you should not have to fear who you are. But yet you can see the gay community in Wyoming, the folks they talk to, talking about the fear of violence, talking about the fear of losing their jobs, talking about the fear of ostracism within society. And so he, and the idea that he is right, and the idea that society is not going to be equal until folks are not, they're not afraid to say that. You think about what's going on. I know that we're not in school now, but you take this as a microcosm of what's going on in the country, but you could even pull it down and look at school systems. And, and you could see whether that's, is that in play here? I wanted to talk about the parade, which I think is a beautiful moment in the films. Well, remember, this is all based off of, true events. This stuff actually happened, which again makes it even that much more amazing. Okay, and of course, going to buffer. Go ahead, buffer away. I am sitting right next to him.
And then I saw the most incredible thing.
As the parade came down the street, the number of people marching for Matthew Shepard had grown like 5 times.
Yeah, and that this is it really shows that there are a lot more people who are understand that that it was wrong. Now, whether these folks themselves are hopefully, you know, you can see the sign there that says "Wake Up, Wyoming." Hate happens right here. That folks are coming to a realization themselves. They may have been tolerant the entire time. They may have been folks like the old couple that believed that they were tolerant, but yet the language coming out of their mouth really kind of shows that they weren't, or maybe they weren't as tolerant as they thought they were. But it is beautiful to see these folks, you know, how many folks were wanting to say something but were afraid, because again, saying something could have led to ostracism, could have led to ostracism in community, could have led to ostracism within their own church, could have led to ostracism, you know, at their jobs. And so they were afraid. But now when they saw other folks stepping out, you know, there's bravery in groups, and so they start to realize that they're not alone. And it is beautiful to see that many folks, to know that that many folks are on the right side, or trying to make steps towards the right side. I wanted to go to, let's see, 49. This lady here who just, this is Laura Linney, who again she's a fantastic actress, but boy, her character is hard to get on this person's side.
Him that it's scary. You know, about his character and spreading AIDS and a few other things, you know, being about the kind of person he was. Meaning, well, he was just a barfly.
You know, so the idea of barfly, you know, somebody who goes to the bar a lot, he's trying to bring up the idea that he was sexually active. And again, if this were to be said about, you know, a young girl who had been, you know, beaten, and, you know, you try to blame her for her because of her behavior. Well, she goes to the bar a lot and she's always, you know, talking, dancing with guys. People would be outraged. People would be absolutely outraged if you used that as a reason to justify her being beaten and tied to a fence and left for dead. But here, this woman, you know, and a lot of people feel that, you know, you've seen other people in the film as well that feel that because of his sexuality that he, you know, again, the one guy saying it, is it half his fault, which, you know, is again showing that absolute level of intolerance. This priest, I want to talk about this priest. Let's see, let's get to him. He's talking about violence. And he really, I think this is the key to the film here. This priest pretty much hits on if you were to say that there was a lesson or what the theme of the movie is, this priest really hits it.
Doesn't make it correct. And I'm not knocking bishops, but what is correct is correct.
Okay, it's this part here.
You think violence is what they did to Matthew? They did do violence to Matthew. But you know, can I make this personal?
Yeah, sure.
Every time you are called a fag, or you are called a les, or
dyke.
Dyke, yeah, dyke. Do you realize that is violence? That is the seed of violence. And I would resent it immensely if you use anything I said to somehow cultivate that kind of violence.
And that's the key. And that's why, you know, that I you know, in the classroom, and I think all teachers should, you know, when it comes to that sort of language, you're talking racial language, or you're talking, you know, language about people's sexuality, when derogatory terms are used, even in jest, you know, when people are, even if they don't mean it the way, you know, they'll say, well, that's not what I meant, or it was just, it doesn't matter. As the priest said, it's sowing the seeds of violence. It's building. You make the joke, and then it turns itself into that, and allows that ugliness to start to open up. And then this priest again when he's talking about the young boys being our teachers, the two killers. Again, we're gonna buffer. Nah, go ahead, just keep buffering. Cool. Oh my God, it's almost like we're back at school with the fact that things don't work. All right, I'm back. Before I got to that last part, I wanted to talk about this, and I put it in the notes as well. This church, this Westboro Baptist Church. It's the Phelps family. Fred is dead. Fred Phelps is dead, and Shirley Phelps, his daughter, is taken over, and they're just an incredibly hateful group of people who use religion to justify their hatred. Actually, what they are is they're con artists. A lot of them are like Shirley, Fred. A lot of they're all, for the most part, they're all one family, and they're lawyers. There's quite a few of them are lawyers, and what they do is they go from town to town and they protest things like Matthew Shepard's funeral. They protested the funerals of people that died in 9/11. So if there's any sort of a big event, somebody, soldiers and so on, if somebody famous dies, they'll protest. And what they're trying to do is incite violence. And once somebody, attacks them, throws something at them, whatever that might be, then they sue the city for not protecting them, and they win. That's how they make money. So in reality, I mean, yes, they are hateful and awful people, but they're con artists who are using their religion to be hateful, but also using their religion in order to bilk cities out of cash.
Still, there are hundreds of people.
That commandment. Now, if he repented in his dying hours, we hope he did. If not, ignorant of the fact that for every 2 thing,
again, we talk angels and
toe with him and show the difference.
Come out with their
vengeance, anger. Now we wouldn't be here.
Very beautiful, very theatrical moment. There's actually a group now that are they're called the Patriot Riders, I believe, and that they're a lot of them are vets, veterans, and they're on motorcycles, and they'll go, if you call them, if the Westboro Baptist Church says they're going to show up, they'll come in their motorcycles, and they will park the motorcycles in front, and then they'll turn them on and then rev them up if somebody's going to a funeral, so that nobody can hear them saying what they're saying, and then they hold up big things to cover the signs. So there are folks that have been trying to, to work against them without causing them any sort of harm, because then they sue. Anyway, I want to get to this, the preacher here, or
Protest if the shepherds want McKinney dead. He wasn't called Aaron, we called him AJ.
Right now, our most important teachers must be Russell Henderson and Aaron McKinney. They have to be our teachers. How did you learn? What did we do as a society to teach you that?
And that's one of the question. I mean, that's really what it is what he just said. How are they going to be your teachers? Well, how did you become so hateful? What was it that you were raised hearing? What was it that you were being raised, learning from society that allowed you to believe that what you were doing was correct? Obviously, there's still a lot of hatred and a lot of violence towards folks in the gay community, a lot of, violence and hatred towards folks of other races or other religions. So then the question is, where's that being learned? Where's that being taught? And then not only do we learn from it, then we figure out, okay, what can we do to try to keep that from happening? So anyway, hope you enjoyed the film. If you have any questions, again, just, message me or whatever you need to do, and I will get back to you as soon as possible. Let me see. All right, well, I'll see you. Hope you enjoyed the film. Hope you enjoyed Troll Hunter. I think that's a fantastic film. Just a real beautiful, low budget, little found footage film from from the Netherlands. Great film. But anyway, all right, I'll see you next time, folks.